Good afternoon. Shall we stand? We're going to have opening prayer. Shall we bow our heads? Father in heaven, thank you for once again being with us today. Thank you for the message. Thank you for the message bearer. Father, as we delve deeper into religious liberty and public affairs in this session, we ask that you will bless us with more information. And Father, help us to apply this information to our lives and share it with others, because unless we share it with others, they won't know. A lot of things are going to be said that people here have not known about. Bless us, dear Father, to assimilate the information that we're being given into our minds to be able to focus, alter our behavior, and share it with others. We ask these mercies and blessings in no other name but the mighty name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay, this forum is going to start. We have Pastor Brown and Elder Ashmead, and they're going to present to us some things about a lot of us we don't know about. So I'll let them take it from here.
So it's always a joy to come and hang out with the saints over here. A lot of good memories, and thankfully, even though many churches that I have some kind of connection with, when I go and visit them now, I don't know anybody. But thankfully, when I come here, I still see some folks, especially some that harken back to what we want to call the good old days. So my heart is glad anytime I come here. Now, I'll explain to you right out of the gate what happens, so you understand when I disappear. I'm not being raptured away. I preached for Religious Liberty Day at Elmont today. And when Elmont first asked me to preach for Religious Liberty Day, they didn't mention anything about an afternoon program. A few days ago, they did an "oh, by the way" on me, and I had already confirmed that I would be here for these two dear people sitting right here. But God is good, because this program starts at 3:30. Theirs starts at 5. So I'm going to hang out here with you for a minute, and my good friend, Dr. Ashmead, and then I'm going to be Black History and scoot over there to do the presentation for them. But I like opportunities like these, because too many times folks in our community are not aware of some of the different issues that are happening, some of the different pressures that are being brought to bear on what's going on. And I don't lose sleep worrying about a lot of these different groups and a lot of different issues that are percolating out there. I learned a long time ago that the best way for a child of God to use his or her time is to develop a faithful, saving relationship with the Lord of glory, because that is what is going to get you through the craziness that's between us and heaven. And trust me when I tell you, it's going to get crazy. But the bottom line is learning that God answers prayer, realizing that he can be trusted, and understanding that our best friend will always be faithfulness to what he asked us to do. If you can get that nailed down in your heart and soul, no matter what happens, you're going to be fine. Because it was that same dynamic that was with the Hebrew boys there on the plain of Dura. It was that same understanding that allowed Daniel to calmly make his egress into a den of hungry lions. They understood what we must understand. Faith is the victory. And when we hold firm and when we hold fast to what God has asked us to do, no matter what the cost may seem to be, when we hold fast, we always position ourselves where God can bless us the way he wants to. Where Satan tries to muddy the water, he tries to throw all kind of variables at you, all kind of situations, all kind of circumstances that somehow make a thing seem like, in this instance, a compromise is warranted. Here, maybe not here, but here, this is a moment where it's kind of okay to, kind of half do it. And the bottom line is, principle is never flexible. Because principle is rooted in the elements of heaven that don't change. Where we do ourselves a favor is to make sure we understand what heaven's principle is. Because once we understand that principle, guess what? No matter what gets thrown at you, you're going to be fine. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. The principle says 10% of your increase belongs to God. That's the principle. It's clear. It's upfront. And once I make up my mind that I'm returning to God, and that's why the Bible said, bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse. Because you got too many people that are willing to return a portion, but they're like, well, this month, Lord, you know what's going on. No. When you make that principle the operative, then when Satan comes along with some funky financial fastball that he throws past you, well, this is an odd situation. And here, God would understand if you borrow some of his money to satisfy what's going on. Once you open up that door, Satan will always give you a reason to take God's money and steal it. So how you keep yourself out of trouble is you say, I don't care what you hit me with. I don't care what comes down the turnpike. I don't care if the car break, if the heater break, if the back break. What's not going to break is my obedience to what God has asked me to do. And so that is where my focus tends to be. However, having said that, I do like to make the members aware of different things that are happening and different things that are going on, because Ellen White makes a very telling statement. She says that if we just sit back in calm expectation of what is to come, and we do nothing to prevent, or at least attempt to prevent, the movement of evil, God is not going to bless us. Some people want to say, well, prophecy said this is going to happen, so let it happen. That is not the mindset that God will bless. He said all of us have a positive duty to spread the light, to share the truth with others, and to work against the movement of evil. That's our job. Whether it looks like we're going to lose for sure or not. No. Your job is, you're not worrying about outcome. You're worrying about doing what God told you to do. And so that's why sometimes understanding some of the forces that are coming to bear on what's going on help you to realize that some mornings you're going to need to pray 5 and 10 minutes longer than you've been praying, just because that's the nature of what we're dealing with. So Dr. Ashmead has put up a very interesting slide, and After giving him an opportunity to comment on it, we're going to springboard into a couple of things. I have a couple of things I want to share with you. Dr. Ashmead has some things to share. And our goal this afternoon is very simple. We want you to leave here inspired. We want you to leave here with a clear understanding of what's going on. And above all, we want you to leave here today a little better prepared to take your place and to make your stand for the cause of God. Because I'm telling you right now, when I go back and count, there were 3 young men standing there on the plain of Dura. And in that crowd were a bunch of young men from the same neighborhood. Some of them lived right up the street. Some of them lived right around the corner. And yet all but 3 of them were out there kissing dust just because the king said so. So we got to get to a place where every tub is standing on its own bottom. And no matter what this one does, no matter what this one does, we got to be able to say this one is going to be on the Lord's side. That's non-negotiable. It's not up for discussion. And if I die, I die, but I will die faithful.
Amen. Amen. I just want to piggyback on what Pastor Brown has shared. The slide that I have up says the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And that is a true statement. We have got to keep our eyes open. But not just open, we need understanding. And we not only need understanding, we need action. We can't sit on the sidelines. Now, I have been working with the Public Affairs Department for some years now. I can't even count. But and I've done many programs. The one thing that has concerned me the most is how do I say this nicely? How ill-prepared we are to tackle the issues of the day, and how easy it is for us to be led astray. And the reason that I believe is the case is that we don't know our fundamental beliefs the way we should, especially in terms of prophecy. And so when events start taking place and people start putting out information in rapid succession, we're not anchored to the truth. And so we just jump on the bandwagon. And so we will end up with only 3 standing while everyone has their face in the dust. And so what I have observed is that we have been prone to believe conspiracy theories when the truth is right there before our eyes. It is easy for us to believe that there is a global one world government that's coming. And we see that on YouTube and Twitter or X, whatever it's called, and Facebook, and we watch these videos and we just embrace whatever the speaker is saying without thinking critically and not understanding that secret societies and all that kind of stuff is not what we need to worry about. There are organizations operating within the country that are public, that we are aware of, and they're having a real impact. And so I know one of them that Pastor Brown will speak about is the Heritage Foundation and their 2025 agenda. One that I want to mention very briefly for us to understand and know that it's out there working and having a real impact is the Federalist Society. How many of you have heard of the Federalist Society? Okay, a good number of you. This is an organization that has certain values. They are conservative. They recruit young attorneys with potential, and they identify people who have a certain mindset, and they sort of shape their careers and prepare them to take the bench. And the bench, when I say bench, to become judges across the country. And so they sign up and they join this organization and they embrace a certain set of values. For example, they look at original intent of the framers of the Constitution. They don't look at the Constitution as an organic type of document that, the meanings of certain phrases can evolve over time based on the context within which they're being used. For them, the Constitution is a document frozen in time, written by men. Its words are immutable and unchangeable. Sound familiar to what we discussed this morning in the sermon? Right. And so you have judges now on the bench. Now, when you look at the current makeup of the Supreme Court, how many justices are there? There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. For most of my life as a young lawyer, the court was divided. It's not an even split. It sort of was divided 5-4. And the conservatives have enjoyed a 5-4 majority for the longest time. Now it's a 6-3 majority. And that is significant. That is dangerous for a democracy when you have that kind of control of one branch of government. There are 3 branches of government. And if one party controls one branch of government or 2 branches of government, we are in trouble. We function best when there are checks and balances. What do I mean by checks and balances? Where power is divided, where power is unified, that is not a recipe for democracy to thrive. And so we have a 6-3 majority on the court. How did that happen? The Federalist Society has been working behind the scenes for years and years, recruiting judges, identifying judges, collaborating with the Republican Party, and making sure that whenever an opening appeared on the Supreme Court, they had someone identified and ready to go. Someone who had been vetted, someone whose history and past and opinions have been reviewed, and they have been determined to be rock solid conservative, and someone who would support the Republican agenda. But not only have they done that, you have seen the Congress, specifically the Senate, engage in practices that violate the principles, Senate principles and protocols in how you go about selecting a justice. And so when President Obama was in his last year of office, I believe it was Justice Antonin Scalia, passed away unexpectedly. What does that mean? The Constitution allows for the sitting president of the United States to select a justice with the advice and consent of the Senate. And so in performing his constitutional function, President Obama selected someone to replace Antonin Scalia. That person was going to be more on the liberal side of things. But in order to get his, go ahead.
But Dr. Ashmead, what's interesting about the point you're making right now is the person that he selected, even though he may have leaned somewhat liberal, he not only was he moderate, but he was moderate to the point that every step along the way before getting to where he was, he had overwhelming support from Democrats and Republicans. In fact, before that whole debacle broke out, if you went back to look, he not only had Republican support, he had overwhelming Republican support because they saw him as a balanced person who wouldn't push too far this way, wouldn't push too far that way. And every time his name came up for appointment prior to that, it was almost always unanimous because of the respect that he enjoyed from both sides.
Yes. And so President Obama was smart to select someone like that because he knew that the selection process had become so politicized. He was making every effort to neutralize the politics that, you know, would take place during the committee meetings and all those kinds of things. And so he made a selection, and Mitch McConnell, who was a Senate leader, came up with a new protocol that was unheard of. He said, we are in an election year, and so the people of the United States should get to make the selection. So even though there was more than enough time available to run the nomination through the processes that result in the judge being put on the bench, Mitch McConnell said we're not bringing that nomination forward until after the election. And so most people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to sail into office. And so the Democrats didn't fight as hard as they should to get this process going, assuming Hillary was going to win, and then she would select her own person. Now, surprise, surprise, the election occurs, and Donald Trump wins. And so Donald Trump got to make the selection to replace Antonin Scalia. Okay, that was bad. It wasn't horrible. What it did was it maintained the 5-4 majority that the conservatives had on the court. Now, all the while during the 8 years that President Obama was in office, folks had been kind of looking at Justice Ginsburg, and they had noticed that she had been declining in health, and they were hoping that she would simply retire so that President Obama could replace her with a younger person who could sit on the court for another 30 to 40 years. But she chose, despite knowing her health limitations, to remain on the court. And I guess she also anticipated that Hillary Clinton would win. And that did not happen. And so, unfortunately, during President Trump's last year in office, she died. Okay? So what was the rule that Mitch McConnell said? He said, in an election year, the people get to make the choice. Now, in this specific situation, there was even less time to process the nomination than there was during Obama's. But the Republicans rushed it through as quickly as they could before November, and they got their conservative justice on the court. And so the Republicans now have a 6-3 majority. And what that means, they have begun a process of dismantling long-held precedents that the conservatives didn't like. The pinnacle achievement was the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Now, you may have your opinions and views on Roe v. Wade. I'm not here to change them or to attack them or anything like that. But what the court has been doing since they now have the 6-3 majority is that in their written opinions, they have been signaling to the states, the state legislatures, and to the federal legislatures in their written opinions, the side note saying, this is what we want, and this is what we would do if such a case came up before us. And so they've been signaling what needs to happen. And so they signaled that they were ready to overturn Roe. And so a number of states passed laws that resulted in their cases going up to the Supreme Court, and Roe was overturned. They did the same thing for affirmative action. And so they have been slowly dismantling long-held precedent, and it is transforming this country in ways that are just unfortunate. They have slowly been eroding the protections that we have with the separation of church and state by allowing much more religious activity in the public square. And so we are seeing slow movements, but we are slowly coming together in church and state because of decisions by the Supreme Court. So I'm raising this for you to understand what is happening. It is not the Illuminati. It is not the Freemasons. It is the Federalists.
They are the vaccine.
It's not they are the ones who are engineering the dramatic and significant changes that we're seeing take place in this country. So I'll stop here and let Pastor Brown talk about another group that has some significant influence on our politics as well.
And before I do that, I want to show you how what he just said ties in to warnings that the servant of the Lord gave us years ago. Testimonies to the Church, Volume 5. This is what the servant of the Lord said. Satan, and I want you to understand who the active agent is. Satan is actively, I look at how the servant of the Lord uses words. She doesn't play with words, and she uses particular words for a particular reason. She says, Satan is actively arranging matters so that the Lord's people may not have mercy or justice. Do you understand when she makes a statement like that, and then when he describes to you the active dynamic taking place in this country and why they're seeking to put key people in key places? A lot of people got bent out of shape about the abortion discussion for the wrong reason. And this happens all the time. People start fighting over here while the real action is happening over here. Because at the end of the day, whether you're against abortion or for it, that wasn't the issue. The issue was that this group, just because they had enough people to do it, blew up process, blew up procedure. Do you understand how dangerous it is to dismantle process? Process is how you get from point A to point B. And no matter who replaces who, as long as you can have the assurance that a process is in place, whether you get some of what you want, you don't get all what you want, you can at least be comfortable that there's a process that works. When they blew up process, what begins to happen now is it's no longer about deciding things on the basis of what we should be talking about. Now it's simply a numbers game. We got enough people to do whatever we want to do, and we're going to do whatever we want to do. That is not an environment in which democracy can flourish. Because now what happens is you become like some of these other countries where as long as you're a good friend of the leader, you're fine. But you don't like the leader, he don't like you, no matter how strong your case is, you're toast from the time you walk in the courtroom. And that's why process matters. Process matters because it means that everybody gets to walk into the room with some comfort level that things will be handled a particular way. And it doesn't always guarantee you're going to get everything that you want or the outcome that you want, but at least you can know that something is in place to get you there. And what you saw with how that whole situation was mishandled was the destruction of process
Can I say
Yes,
one thing,
absolutely.
Pastor? So I mentioned to you that the Supreme Court is now signaling to legislatures what decisions they're ready to overturn. In a recent decision, and I haven't read it yet, but in a recent decision, Justice Thomas, you know who Clarence Thomas is, signaled that he had serious reservations regarding whether Brown v. Board of Education was rightly decided. Now, do you know what Brown v. Board is? Do you understand that the magnitude of that decision and how that decision transformed this country? That was the decision that said that separate but equal is not equal, and schools should be integrated. And based on that decision, a more equitable society began to develop within this country a mere 50, 60 years ago. And now we have a sitting justice of the Supreme Court who is questioning that decision. A black justice is questioning that decision. And so we should watch now over the next year to see what states pass laws dealing with the issue of segregation. Go ahead, Pastor.
And make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. And that's why his slide is so compelling. We continue to live in an environment where things that you thought were established, things that you thought were above reproach and above discussion and above controversy, where all of those things tomorrow could easily be called into question. Do you realize that one of the things that bothered me, and you know, I try to be careful when I talk about certain things because people love to paint you in a political mode. Oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're this. What I'm about to say has nothing to do with what party I'm registered with. What troubled me about many aspects of the Trump administration, he made it cool to be cruel and act the fool. The numbers bear out what I'm saying to you. There was a 62% jump in attacks against minorities and Jewish people and what have you on his watch. Why? Because the way he conducted himself sent a message to other people, oh, I can throw off restraint now. I got somebody in the White House who thinks like I think, and I'm tired of y'all niggas, so you know what? I'm going to call it like I want to call it. And that fact disturbed me more than anything else that he did, because when people think like that, things that we thought were settled, all of it gets called into question now. Because when you have enough unbalanced, irrational people in the room thinking they can now call the shots, all kind of stuff. Do you realize that if some people had their way, and I know whereof I speak, if some people had their way, tomorrow they'd have every last one of you back on somebody's plantation and dare you to say something about it. Some months ago, right outside, that's fine. Some months ago, right outside Orlando, right outside Disney World, white supremacists were there on a major thoroughfare demonstrating. Folks, that's very telling. On the way to visit Mickey, they felt comfortable enough standing out there talking about it's time for white people to be in charge again. We're tired of you all trifling darkies. Right there on the way to Disney World. So I'm saying to you, his observation just now is very telling, because the moment you stop paying attention, you'll be surprised what nonsense is there just waiting to break off, because that's how it is. I pulled up the website for a group. Here's how they describe themselves. Join the most influential conservative group in America. For 50 years, we have led the conservative movement. Now you can be part of this exclusive group. Become part of a movement that can transform America. That's the website for the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation holds themselves out as the bastion of conservatism. And if you know anything about conservatism at all, therefore, less government intrusiveness and, they don't want people paying taxes. And here's the thing. They say traditional American values. That's one of the things they hold up as part of their platform. And yet, here's what I find so remarkable. In one breath, you want to tell me that you are the watchdog for American values. And in the next breath, you want to stand out in front of a courtroom defending somebody that is clearly, properly indicted on certain charges. Now, you know why I say it that way? I say it that way because it's possible for anybody to get hauled into court. But you know what is hard to do? It's hard to get an indictment. I can say John is ugly. I can say he's stupid. I can say all kind of stuff about him. But having to present enough evidence for any of that to stick, because clearly your eyes tell you he's not ugly. And if you heard him speak this morning, your ears tell you he's not stupid. The point is, the fact that the former president of the United States was properly indicted on over 91 different charges, that is not a political witch hunt. That is not somebody, well, we don't like you, so we're going to get you any way we can. That's somebody who was so goofy that he got himself, in many instances on video, breaching protocols that got him in trouble. And the other reason it's wrong to call it a political witch hunt is because, did you notice how many people close to him, as a result of their activity with him, are now doing prison ministry from the inside? That's very telling, folks. That's very telling. I can go in court and say anything I want to, but the way court works, and thankfully court is still one of the areas where certain things still work the way it's supposed to. You got to be able to prove that there's enough here for us to move forward on. And I need you to understand that in that jury that unanimously convicted him on all 34 counts, some of the people in that jury voted for Donald Trump last time he ran for president. So what I'm saying to you is, when groups like these tout themselves as the stronghold of conservatism, conservatives used to be the party of law and order. So you know what that meant? If you broke the law, doesn't matter who you are, we're going to call you to account. And now these same groups are standing out in front of the courthouse defending their guy. Now listen. I say this all the time. I'm not going to tell anybody who to like. Like who you want to like. I remember when Trump was running against Biden. I was standing in line right a few blocks over that way, and the lady in front of me looked just like me, skin kissed by the sun, amen. She stood there talking about, well, I just like the way Donald Trump talks. When he's talking about people and when he's putting people down, I just like it. And I'm saying to myself, that's all you want in a president? All right, good luck with that one. So like who you want to like. I will never, ever tell you, oh, you shouldn't like this one, you shouldn't like that one. But what I will insist on is that you maintain some level of objectivity so that whether you like a person or don't like a person, you have enough moral integrity to say, I like you, but what you did here is wrong. And that's what has disappeared. So these groups that talk about, oh, we are the backbone of conservatives, that rings hollow with me. Because whether you like the Republican potential nominee or not, there is much about who he is, and there is much about what he does that doesn't pass muster when it comes to traditional conservatism. And you can't tell me that the end justifies the means. Okay, he got rid of taxes, although interestingly enough, did you notice that the tax bill that he got through, the taxes that you got a break on, those provisions disappeared, but the tax breaks that the corporations got were permanent right out of the gate. And the loss of that revenue ultimately triggered deficit, which in turn triggered inflation. You cannot tell me, well, because he did some stuff with taxes, even though even that is suspect, well, he got some conservative justices in place. You can't tell me that the fact that somebody got you some of the stuff that you wanted means you can now turn a blind eye to some of the other things that they are doing that will, not might, will destroy democratic norms. This country got where it got because no matter who came into the courtroom, you knew you were going to be held accountable. And now what we are seeing is the question is no longer, is this right or is this wrong? The question is, what is my guy saying? And based on what their guy is saying, that's where they line up. So people who just a few years ago used to have a very different stance on things, now, because their guy said jump, the only question they asked was how high. And that's a problem. When you destroy democratic norms and when you shred the ability to hold people accountable, I don't want to live in an environment like that. Because what it means is if you know the right person, you can do whatever you want to do and nobody's going to say boo to you. But this same person over here, guilty of the exact same thing, they will put him under the jail and beat him with the whooping stick just because he has the wrong affiliation. And Dr. Ashmead, one of the things that I'm most bothered by is the fact that today there's no moral compass for any of this stuff. Mike Johnson, who used to bill himself as Mr. Holy Holy, none of them are operating in a way that says, I have some integrity about me. And do you know why that is? Donald Trump only gives you two options. That's it. There's no hybrid. There's no somewhere in between. You only have two options. Either you support everything he's asking you to do, or you get out of the administration. That's it. You will not join his administration thinking to yourself, well, I'll help him to temper this down, and I'll help him to do a little better in this area. Many have tried, all have failed. And not only have all failed, but some of them have landed in jail because of their participation in what he's doing. You know, I need to make sure people understand. When you hear me make these statements, I'm not speaking as a Democrat. I'm speaking as a preacher. Because at the end of the day, we all must appear before the justice seat of Christ. And we all must give an account for the deeds done in the body. And if you think down here you can get away with something because of who you know. All I can say is, baby, good luck with that one when you get up there and you meet the Lord, because it's not going to be that kind of party at all. Unfortunately, groups like the Heritage Foundation have a lot of influence behind the scenes. And let me help you understand why behind the scenes action is so powerful. This is from the same book. The Sunday movement is now making its way in darkness. The leaders are concealing the issue, and many who unite in the movement do not themselves see whether the undercurrent is tending. Its professions are mild and apparently Christian, but when it shall speak, it will reveal the spirit of the dragon. It is our duty to do all in our power to avert the threatened danger. We should endeavor to disarm prejudice by placing ourselves in a proper light before the people. We should bring before them the real question at issue, thus interposing the most effectual protest against measures to restrict liberty of conscience. Folk, this thing is about to not just get real. This thing is about to get mighty real. And what's going to appear to you like something that just sprung out of nowhere, in reality, a long, protracted process has been hard at work, putting all the ducks in the right place and connecting all the dots just so that long, cherished goals are finally realized. And the servant of the Lord said the outcome is designed so that the people of God are without mercy or justice. That's why today you better leave this place having determined to meet Jesus for yourself. Because in the time of trouble, he is still the strong tower that the righteous can run into and be safe. And I tell people all the time, this thing is not going to end in nuclear conflagration. This thing is not going to end in global warming where all the glaciers melt and Queens gets flooded under 20 feet of water. This thing is going to end with the cloud the size of a man's hand getting closer and closer. And it's going to end with us looking up saying, lo, this is my God. I have waited for him, and he will save me. That's the Jesus that you better be sure you know today.
So, Pastor, I know you have to leave, and before you leave, I want to give the congregation an opportunity to ask some questions about what we have shared or any other issues that they may have questions about. So let's give you that 10 minutes. Anyone has any questions, come to the mic, and we will try to respond as best we can. You may agree with us, you may not, but we are going to respect each other's opinions on these issues.
And while the first question is coming to the mic, I want to be abundantly clear about something. I am not sitting here acting like the Republicans are the devil and the Democrats are the sons and daughters of God. That is not what I'm saying. Trust me when I tell you, I understand that there's enough nonsense on both sides of the aisle that it is not political process that will be the solution. But guess what? Let's call it for what it is. We had 8 years of the Obama administration. And yes, people are not happy that some of the things happened with same-sex marriage and all the other stuff, all the other nonsense that happened. Even though coming out the no-tell motel, you got Democrats and Republicans coming out the same no-tell motel. But guess what didn't happen during the 8 years that Barack Obama was president of this country? You had 8 scandal-free years. You know how hard that is to do?
You forgot the tan suit.
He didn't get in trouble. His wife didn't get in trouble. His daughters didn't get in trouble. His mother-in-law didn't get in trouble. His dog didn't even get in trouble. You know how hard that is to do? What happened in the second term of Bill Clinton's presidency? You remember all the trouble he got in? What happened in the second term of Bush? You know how hard it is to stay out of trouble? And you had 8 years under close scrutiny where that brother did nothing that would allow anybody to hold him before the court of public opinion. The only charge against him, he was half black. And for some, that was enough to knock him out. So I just need y'all to understand that, because for me, this is not a Republican-Democrat discussion. But the fact is, it is Republicans standing out in front of the courthouse trying to tell me that somebody who's guilty on all 34 counts is just being picked on. I'm sorry. You want to believe that? I got a bridge in Brooklyn I will sell you cheap. All right.
Any questions? Don't be shy. Use the mic. Use the mic. Use the mic.
Okay. So, can you hear me now?
It's on. Yeah, it's on.
With all of those charges against him, he's sitting in court, everything, all the evidence. How is it possible that he is still thinking or believing that he is going to be president?
Okay. And Dr. Ashby can speak to this even better than I could. But, well, go ahead for the sake of time.
Sure. So his conviction does not preclude him from running for president. The Constitution sets the qualifications for running for president, and a felony conviction does not disqualify him from doing so. There are certain states that a felony conviction will prevent you from voting. There are certain roles within corporations that a felony conviction will prevent you from holding. For example, chief financial officer, where you have, a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders and those types of things. There are roles within the military that if you have a felony conviction, you cannot do, but he would be the commander-in-chief of the military if he were to become president again. So, yes, this is deeply disturbing, deeply troubling.
Well,
right.
Here's what I want you to hold on to, though, and this is why I found it so fascinating that the entire process was playing out the way it was. Because remember, all of the 92 counts against him are not created equal. So, for example, what he did here in New York, yes, they're felony convictions, but the nature of those convictions is such that, and take him out of it for a minute, somebody else convicted of this may or may not be facing jail time. Jail time is where this thing gets real interesting, because some of the other charges against him in other jurisdictions are serious enough that if found guilty of those, bruh is going to be doing the orange dance in the orange jumpsuit. That is where your run for the White House now gets imperiled, because you can't be president from jail. And so
let me say this: the current conviction can carry jail time with it. Okay, the court will certainly take into account the fact that he is a first-time supposed offender, but his history will also be a factor. And so the recent civil findings of sexual assault, the recent civil findings of fraud in the suit brought by the Attorney General, all of that will be factored into his sentencing. His ongoing inability to follow court orders and to defy court orders about commenting on the case and witnesses in particular, the judge will certainly take take all of that into account in whatever and in following whatever recommendation comes from the probation office. So there is a good possibility that this conviction could result in some time in prison or an order of home confinement, keeping him off the campaign trail. Either way, we know that the Republican Party will, make as big a deal of this as they can. But Pastor Brown is correct. The other charges pending in Georgia, and certainly the charges that have been filed by the special prosecutor, are much more substantive and can result in significant jail time. And as you can see, the court system is not cooperating with the process. And so the judges involved have done everything they can to delay these cases proceeding. And in fact, he is appealing them. He's asserted a defense of immunity, and that has gone before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is taking its time in rendering its decision. I think by the end of June, the court session will end, so they will have to rule on his immunity claim by the end of June or this month. With a 6-3 majority on the court, there is a strong possibility, I can't predict what they will do, that they will find some sort of exception, that they will try to limit to this particular case and would not then have general applicability across the board to protect him from prosecution, so that he will at least not face any additional convictions prior to the upcoming election. And this should be disturbing for us, that a political party will stand behind someone who has all of these issues: 2 impeachments, civil findings of sexual assault, and civil findings of fraud, and now criminal conduct, and he's still the party leader for the party that claims to be Christian and claims to be upholding morality in the country.
And law and order. And you know what that sounds like? That sounds like people wanting to throw out all of the 10 Commandments because they don't like number 4. To the mic.
I had one question, Pastor. I was looking at MSNBC a couple months ago when all this process was starting to take place, and they were saying, someone was saying that, let's say Donald Trump was to be convicted, given jail time, that President Biden should pardon him. I don't care what it is. State,
I
federal,
did hear
what
that.
have you. How can you do all this and then you attack the same man, but then you want him to pardon you? It doesn't make sense.
So the nature of the beast is such that that whole idea, as crazy as it may seem to a lot of people, should not be entirely discounted. That is the reason why spoken against this system will be the words, "Many, many, takel you farson," weighed in the balances and found wanting, because just that type of thing that allows all the back and forth is why all of this stuff is going to get shut down, and he will reign forever.
2 things. First, I grew up with Nixon and Watergate. Every night we watched the news. It was the Republican Party on its own that got rid of him, because at that time, it wasn't they were so religious. It was country over party.
Yep.
Now, I watched this, and I tell everybody the series. There was a series on Netflix called The Family, and it started with the prayer breakfast back in the day, where they took religion and made that their Trump ticket, not Donald Trump, but Trump, and the ticket to go move forward to get all their agendas, like the Ku Klux Klan used religion to keep black people in their place. So religion is always the wheel that they use. But what I want to say, and I want you to expound on, Pastor, is the importance not only, you peeled back the justices well, but what about, to explain, number one, all the federal judges that locally Donald Trump put into place. And that's why Georgia is just sitting on ice, because he put her there. And also the importance of us with local elections and knowing what we can do locally and for our state to keep it, because state rights rule as well.
The reality of the situation is some of these things are the things that Ellen White was talking about when she said we don't get to just sit back and stick our heads in the sand. Active participation in what's going on around you is important, because there are people who don't care what you think unless they see you as somebody who's active in the community. If you're active, you vote, and you're concerned about the issues, now you've got their attention. Do you know why a lot of our communities don't get paid attention to? Do you understand why we could have such a discussion about whether or not the Rite Aid that closed is going to be turned into a shelter? Historically, our communities have zero pushback. Oh, we'll fuss, we'll make a little noise, but we won't do anything past that. And that's why we end up dealing with a lot of stuff that they never end up dealing with. Because you know what they do? They organize. They show up to meetings. They let people know in no uncertain terms, I'm watching you and I'm paying attention to what you're doing. And we don't do that. So when you talk about being active on the community level, I need you to understand how vitally important that is. Because even if you don't like anybody that's running, people need to see you as somebody that they need to be concerned about because of your level of participation. And your level of participation will get you a seat at the table that somebody else won't get. It pays to be involved because so much is at stake. And the stuff that happens in the back room, if you have a seat at the table, you saw what happened when they leaked what the Supreme Court was getting ready to do with their thing. It created a big kerfuffle. Having a seat at the table makes a lot of good sense. Dr. Parker has written on his face the fact that he has a very good question. And Dr. Parker, my good friend, Dr. Ashmead, is going to address it for you. I've got to get beamed over to my next religious liberty presentation. But let me say this before I go. Jesus is soon to come. And when he shows up, I want him to be able to say of me, well done, thou good and faithful servant. If anybody here, for whatever reason, decides to get stuck on stupid and bust hell wide open, if I get within swinging distance, I'm going to slap you in the back of your big head. Let's live right, let's be saved, and let's enjoy heaven together.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, the question that I have is what the Speaker of the House has been talking about since this conviction on Donald Trump. Can the Supreme Court dismiss results like this from a conviction from a case that was tried even before it goes up the appeal process and gets up to the Supreme Court level? Can they sit up there and say, well, what happened down here? Let's just throw that out.
So where we are, this is a criminal conviction in state court. And so the appellate process will go through the appellate state court first. And so I am not an expert in New York. I practice in Connecticut. But I know The highest court in New York is the Court of Appeals. In many other states, there is the Superior Court, then the Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court in New York is the Court of Appeals. But there is a second layer court in New York as well, that his conviction, once he is sentenced, he will have the right to appeal. And they will get the first crack at hearing, his appeal. Certainly they will have to find that the court entered some sort of order or ruling during the course of the trial that they believe substantially changed the outcome or had the ability to change the outcome, and that was improper. Once they have ruled on it, then he can go to the appellate, the Court of Appeals in New York, and they will get a shot at it. If there are issues of the magnitude related to the Constitution, then he can appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States. And they can then vacate the conviction and send the case back for retrial with instructions. So that's sort of how the process works. But the President of the United States, who is currently President Biden, cannot pardon him for a state conviction. He can only pardon him for a federal conviction. And the Supreme Court is only going to hear issues related to the Constitution or alleged violations of the Constitution of the United States. I'm not aware of the claims that they would make under those circumstances right now, but I'm sure they will try to come up with something. He can't take, no appeal can occur until the sentencing. Yeah, again, people say things. Look, Donald Trump has an influence on these guys, and he is trying to win his case through public opinion and not the court system. He knows that he can't prevail through the court system, and so he has to create a scenario where enough people are angry and someone comes up with some novel idea to get him out of this mess. But he's in a lot of trouble right now. We are focused on the criminal conviction, but he also has the fraud finding that imperils his financial situation. So, he's dealing with a lot of issues right now, and we'll see what ultimately happens. Any other questions before we move on?
My one is like a comment. I work in JFK, and in order to get a job that fall under the federal government, you have to go back to your background check up until age 16. Think of that. And if it, apart from a traffic offense, if it is found that any other offense you have committed, apart from a traffic breach, you dare not get a job. So I am wondering, how could it be that people convicted for offense like this, and not only Donald Trump, but even member of Congress, and still able to run and still able to function? You think any of us could have gone through what he went through, going out at the court each day and saying the things about the judge and the judge's daughter and things that we would be in jail? You understand? Or people would be bringing food to us if they allow us.
You wouldn't get the food, Your point is valid. What I will say to you is the reason why this is happening the way it is because for your job, federal legislation has outlined the qualification. So laws have been passed outlining the qualification to get the type of job that you have. And that's what happens across the board in many other situations. The Constitution sets the standard, the qualifications for the office of president. You have to be a certain age, and there's some other qualifications that we can look up if needs be, but a criminal conviction does not disqualify you from the office of president. And so that is why you see him being able to do that. I think in terms of him flouting court orders, judges are creatures of politics as well. And any judge understands the implications of putting a former president and the current Republican nominee in prison during the election. Judges can do it. They could have done it, but the implications would be significant, and the judge would risk people alleging and asserting that he is not impartial. And so any judge facing that situation is going to think twice before putting a former president in lockup. They would not think twice about putting you in lockup, but they would think twice because of his position. It's unfair, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. All right, any questions before we move? Go ahead. Go over the mic, go to the mic.
No, so I'm saying while this is all going on, the insurrection is also still being investigated.
So I think that charges, the special prosecutor has brought two sets of charges. One dealing with the documents that the president, the confidential documents that the president apparently took with him from the White House that he did not turn in when he should have. And then there are also charges dealing with the insurrection as well. And there are charges filed in state court related to the insurrection. And so, he's got a lot to deal with, whether or not these cases move forward before the election, that remains to be seen. And in terms of the ones involving the federal charges, can he simply pardon himself from those? That remains to be, look, that will be heavily litigated. I don't know how the court will come down. Maybe their immunity decision will tell us what their views are with respect to the presidency. If they find the president is immune, that will be a finding that will remove some of our checks and balances within the system. So, and what I mean by checks and balances, there are three co-equal branches of government, right? You have the judiciary, you have the legislative, and you have the executive. And each one of them has power to check the other. And so when the executive branch passes a law, the president can veto that law. If the executive branch overrides the presidential veto, the Supreme Court can come in and determine that that law is unconstitutional. But if the Supreme Court gets out of control and the legislature is upset by that, they can come in and limit the venue of the court, meaning limit the types of cases that can go before the court, basically stripping them of their power. And obviously Congress has the ability and the power to impeach the president. That's what's called checks and balances. If you make a finding that the president is immune from prosecution, you limit the ability of any legislative body to kind of control him by the process of impeachment or criminal prosecution. So that's why these decisions are so important, because you could be creating a situation where we have a president who has powers akin to a king. And I don't want to overstate things, Sometimes we say things and we create a hysteria about it. A lot has to happen before the president has that kind of power. But we need to keep in place the checks and balances that were put there by the framers of the Constitution. Okay?
This is not so much a question as you guys talked a lot about the Heritage Foundation. Is it true that this foundation has a cabinet in waiting for Donald Trump?
So there is a document that has been created by the Heritage Foundation, and they're trying to put together essentially a Christian government. And their goal, their view is to sort of fire a lot of the current employees of the federal government and replace them with Christians, okay? And, the hysteria that has been created, I'm going to call it that for now, is that, in this document they talk about Sunday laws as well. And so that has caught the ears of Adventists, and the document is called, I think it's called 2520, right? That's the plan for 2520, okay? And that sounds scary, but let's keep something in mind. The agenda for 2520 for both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is set by the party leaders. And whatever agenda they are going to have will be clearly outlined in the party platform. And so the Heritage Foundation can say what they want to do, but we should look carefully at what the Republican Party platform is and what the Democratic Party platform is. That will outline the agenda for the next 4 years, for whoever is elected. So, even if Donald Trump wins in the fall, it doesn't mean that the 2520 or the 2025 agenda of the Heritage Foundation will be automatically implemented, and in the next 4 years we will have Sunday laws. Just keep in mind that we still have our separation of powers in place. The First Amendment is still in place. The Supreme Court, even though they're kind of shading the issues, they have been, they will not they will not allow a Sunday law to be implemented like that. Okay, a lot more has to happen before the agenda that we're talking about can take place. I know that we watch a lot of videos online and it gets us excited and all that kind of stuff, but we need to be balanced as a people. And so that's why I said what I said earlier. We need to understand what we believe. And so that when all the stuff is blowing around on social media, we're not caught up in it, because that is what will lead us into some serious trouble. And this sort of leads me, you're right, to my first slide. I don't know if you can see it, but the highlight is social media and the price of freedom. In 2016, it was quite a shock for everyone that Donald Trump won the election. And people couldn't simply understand how he was able to take down the powerful Clinton machine. They were well funded beyond everything, and Trump, as usual, had a shoestring budget. Not enough funding. Testing. Limited funding. And yet he was able to get his message out in a way that Hillary Clinton failed to do. And so some really smart people began looking at the issue, and they realized something very important. They realized the power of social media. They realized the power of social media. What Donald Trump would do, he figured out that the vast majority of Americans, because they have become addicted to social media, looking at my son right now, he's sitting in the back, he's probably in social media. You like that call out, don't you? Okay, I'm teasing. He knows I'm teasing him. I play around. But the vast majority of Americans, we are basically hooked on social media. I will confess that I am. You know, I wake up in the morning, I look at Instagram, I see the TikTok videos, and I spend a half an hour laughing at them, and then I share them with my friends, and then we spend another half an hour of them liking and commenting on those videos. Now, if I'm doing that, our kids are doing that, we're all doing that, we are basically spreading information in an unprecedented way. And Donald Trump figured out that if I put together a short little snippet of saying something funny and comical about Hillary, calling her Crooked Hillary or something along those lines, put that video out, what would happen is his followers would start sharing it with friends and family, and people just began to believe it, right? And so it would spread because, you know, the video was coming from John Ashmead. John Ashmead is a credible person, and so if John Ashmead is sharing this video, that means he believes it, and if he believes it, then I should believe it, and so it just keeps spreading like wildfire. And so his videos spread in a way that generated enough media and social media for his views, and people started liking him, and they're like, you know what, all the other politicians, they keep talking, let's try a new guy, a new unproven, untried guy. And before you know it, he won the election. Have mercy. In the second time around, 2020, everyone was aware of what had happened. And what was happening significantly in 2020? Can anyone remember? COVID, yeah. Yeah, the first time I preached at this church, it was a virtual sermon, right? A virtual sermon. We couldn't even be here. And, you know, people were, look, it's 4 years later, but this thing was terrifying. It sent fear and challenges. And during COVID, as the government was taking measures to prevent the spread of COVID, and y'all didn't want to wear your masks, right? I can't breathe. Right? You know, y'all didn't want to social distance, all that kind of, this is end times upon us. We got people in the church. This is, you know, masking and vaccines is the mark of the beast. They're putting stuff into the vaccines, and it's a chip, and we all getting chipped, and we don't know we're getting chipped, and we're gonna have the mark of the beast, right? Now, I'm not getting off topic. I'm gonna bring it all back. Stay with me. The thing that fascinated me was that Adventists were falling for this stuff. Now, we just studied our Sabbath school lesson today, and that included a discussion on the mark of the beast. We should have known that the mark of the beast was not a vaccine. Had nothing to do with it, right? But, you know, videos went out, short snippets, and people began becoming afraid, and all of a sudden, people don't want a mask. They don't want the vaccine because it's crazy. And social media played a substantial role in all of that. And the president was in the mix, stirring it up, right? Because he knew he had an election coming up. And he understood, he got lucky the last time. And, he knew people that looked like me with this, with my complexion were going to come out in big numbers, right? And he didn't want all the voting to take place. And so he started saying some stuff and putting out misinformation. And what started happening is the social media companies started putting little caveats underneath his statements, saying, especially the vaccine statements and the vaccine statements of others. And so they would say, someone would put something out about the vaccine, and then a little comment the media company, social media company, would put a little comment underneath it, right? And what social scientists found is that once that little comment underneath it was placed, questioning the credibility, people wouldn't forward it. And so the same thing happened to Trump the second time around, as he, this guy, I'm just being honest, he was truth challenged. And, all his statements, when he would put something out and the media company would put their little thing, it wasn't being followed. And so his message didn't get out as well the second time around. And we see the outcome. Biden won the election. And so my question to you, as you think about this, did these social media companies violate the First Amendment by either removing content that they knew to be false from their platform, or putting that little caveat saying the statement was false? How many of you believe that this was done in violation of the First Amendment? They were restricting free speech. Some of you, no? Does anyone? Or everyone says no? You're going to go a little better. Come, a brave man.
A little bit of history here. A lot of the first time round, the information that came out from Trump had no restrictions below.
Mm-hmm.
The second time round, and before that, a little bit of history in that many organizations looked at what Trump's saying and looked at where the information was coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and found that information did not necessarily came from Trump. It came via something else, and all he did was to agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
and hashtag it, and everyone started to follow. The second time round, because of the restriction on him, they didn't follow.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I see it.
Okay. So I'm just asking, is this a violation of free speech? All right, my brother, go ahead.
Okay. You can go in a theater, you can go in a parking lot and scream fire. You can go in a parking lot and scream fire, but you're not affecting anybody. You go into a theater and scream fire, now you're affecting those people around. The information you gave is false and somebody may get injured. When you threaten national security, you can say free speech all you want, but now you're threatening national security and the safety of others. So now they need to check that fact, to make sure what they're saying is factual. So now you're undermining the security of the nation, the security of other people. So you can talk all you want to in free speech, but now you're affecting other people.
Okay, I like that. Nice commentary. Anyone else? All right, so your comment was appropriate. But the first thing that we need to understand is the First Amendment applies to the government. It's the government that should not restrict free speech. The media companies are private companies. They're corporations. Facebook is not a government corporation. TikTok, not a government corporation. Well, at least Congress seems to believe that they're owned by the Chinese. I don't know. I just don't know. And so they're doing some wacky things right now. But for the most part, Instagram, what's some other social media companies out there? Facebook, all of them, they're private companies. And so they can, you use their platform by agreeing to their terms and conditions. And so if you put content up that they disagree with, they can remove it. You don't have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook, right? And so, just keep that in mind. But the question still remains, as this brother highlighted, that, when you post on Facebook, when you put something there, you have to think about who is going to read and how that's going to impact them. And so that calls for us to be very responsible with the content that we share. We should not share, as Christians, questionable, insupportable content that we have not verified ourselves. It doesn't matter who the speaker is, whether it is a speaker that's from within the church. If we can't verify and know that it's true for ourselves, we should not forward. Because what I saw during COVID was disturbing. And I know, look, people, I respect everyone's right, whether they wanted to be vaccinated or not. That's the choice that you have the right to make. However, a lot of misinformation was spread via social media that was just incredible. And so many of us believed what we were seeing. And we were getting information from mechanics, bus drivers, and the unemployed and the unemployable, giving serious medical advice regarding the dangers of the vaccine. And their advice became credible because it came through social media. And so the point I'm making to you is that social media, these platforms, can create chaos within our society if they are used irresponsibly. And so just my admonition from young to old, be very responsible. Understand, especially for our young people, there are a few of you here, understand that what you post now on social media, your future employer will see. The videos you post, the speech you post, everything is available. It doesn't disappear. It's there permanently. So be very careful what you post. Okay? Go ahead. You have a question.
Also, the quacks that were out there, because during COVID, you can always find that doctor. Because remember the doctor that is now the Surgeon General in Florida? Mm-hmm. He had all kinds of crazy information out there. Then the woman doctor who said aliens can impregnate you. So these are the people that far crazy vaccination people were using with a white coat on to pass their agenda. So you have to also be careful where you get your information from when it comes from people in a white coat. Right. As well, because they can find anyone.
Right. You just, you need to verify, look at the source before you believe. The Bible, Jesus told us in Matthew 24 that even the elect will be deceived. We are living in an age where deception can occur. There is now artificial intelligence out there. There's a new development, and its potential can be devastating. Now they can create an image of me that will have my voice, will look like me speaking on a video, and you will not be able to distinguish it from me, and they can have me saying anything they want, or you saying anything they want, or President Biden or Trump saying anything, and it can be completely misleading and misrepresent who the person is, and that can get out and it cause so much damage before it can be corrected. So just as we're looking right now, be very careful what you believe. Study your Bible. Know the foundation. Know what the mark of the beast is and what it isn't. Know whether or not a one world government can ever occur. Okay? Understand whether or not the Adventist Church teaches that, because if I were to survey you right now, I'm not sure what the answers would be, because some of us don't know what Daniel chapter 2 teaches. So we've got to learn the foundation, learn the basics, because social media and artificial intelligence is out there, and it's going to spread information far and wide, and if we don't know what we believe, we will be swept up in the crowd. I'm going to move on. Critical race theory, CRT. Controversial. After, who was the gentleman who the police officer kneeled on his neck? George Floyd. After the George Floyd incident, what happened in this country? Well, Black Lives Matter existed before George Floyd. They were operating well before George Floyd. But what happened was we saw protests across the country of epic proportions. It wasn't just black people marching. Everybody was marching. People were mad. They were upset, and rightly so. This was such a breach of the public trust. But, every crisis is an opportunity. And so the Republican Party in certain states said, we want to get rid of black history. And so we're going to tell people that it is because critical race theory is being taught in our schools why people are out there protesting and tearing up and burning down. And so you will see that all of a sudden a number of states across the country began banning the teaching of critical race theory in our elementary schools. Now the question is, was critical race theory being taught in our elementary schools? Can anyone tell me what critical race theory is? Y'all don't even know. Huh? No. 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 That's not what critical race theory is. No. 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 Anyone know what critical race theory is? Oh, he looking it up, bro. And I bet you're still gonna be wrong. Go ahead. See, he's using artificial intelligence.
Critical race theory is an interdisciplinary academic field focused on relationships between social conceptions of race and ethnicity, social and political laws, and media.
Right. So critical race theory is a social theory that looks at how race intersects with our laws, our legal system, and our political structure. And so the belief is that, decisions are made in a certain way because of race. And that's what critical race theory is trying to look at. So it's really something that is taught in law schools. There may be some college level courses, but it's not something that you can teach in elementary school or junior high school or high school. And so the banning of critical race theory in these institutions was really the banning of the teaching of Black history. Now, why would people want to ban Black history? Because they wanted to teach that the slaves were happy and they learned skills. Right. 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 But because they saw for the first time that there were white people who were angry about what happened with George Floyd. And they're like, we don't want a situation where poor whites and blacks are now united to fight the system. And so we need the divisions to continue, the separation to continue. And so this has been introduced into our system to create confusion and to erase history. If there is so much of our own history that we don't know, or our history as Adventists that we don't know. How many of you knew that William Miller's farm was part of the Underground Railroad? Some. How many of you knew that many of the pioneer Adventists were involved in the abolitionist movement? But we're just learning that now because of social media. But we have to continue to learn it, understand it, and teach it. Because if we don't, we will forget it. And it will shape our future. And so these are issues taking place in our country. The Supreme Court and all the courts are getting involved in all of these types of issues, and we need to pay close attention. We need to be vigilant and not just think this is, something that's unimportant. We had a statement issued from someone in the General Conference condemning critical race theory as incompatible with the teachings of the church. So, we've got to understand what's happening in the world around us and how the world can influence us in such a subtle way. Because that statement is going to go around in certain communities within the church without an understanding that it simply is looking at the role that race played. What role did race play in the setting up of the Adventist church? Or what role does race play in how the church is organized? From the General Conference down to the divisions, to the unions, to the conferences, to the churches. Is race playing any role today? And that's what someone who's studying critical race theory will look at. Race was there, man. It was there. So, look, this thing is so complicated and difficult, and the church has not always made the best decisions. We have to be honest with ourselves, And that's why we need to be vigilant as we continue to deal with these issues. And look, the church has made significant progress. We can't ignore that and act like nothing good has happened. Significant progress has been made, but we need to know the history as well.
She and I went to General Conference, was it in St. Louis? Yeah. General Conference president didn't want any gospel music played in any of the worship services.
Right. Well, I'm going to be careful how I comment on that. Look, we have worship wars in our church, and race plays a role in how we land and on those issues, and people are sensitive, and again, my role is to say that we need to respect the views of everyone and figure out how to coexist even when we disagree. But, this is an issue that is certainly percolating in the country and that we should remain informed. I have one more slide, and then we're done. Mayor Adams. This was a big headline. Now, I don't think it is as bad as it reads. I don't think that he was advocating that we should unite church and state. When you read the article and the issue more carefully, he was trying to say that as a human being, I cannot separate myself. I cannot divide myself. If I am a Christian, I can't divide my Christianity from my daily views and activities. And so if I'm going to take a position, it's going to be a position I take as a Christian. Because we live our faith, right? We are justified by faith. The just live by faith. And so that means, it has a certain soteriological implication, meaning how we're saved, but it also describes how we live. We live our faith as Christians. And I think that's what the mayor was saying. But there are other people, as I shared this morning, who want to impose that faith by force on others. And that's what we need to be careful of. We should be free to live by faith, and others should be free to live the way that they choose. And we need to figure out a way of coexisting together. That's what freedom of conscience is all about. And it is hard. It's becoming increasingly difficult these days to respect freedom of conscience. Many of us are fearful of the implications. And so we need to be vigilant. We need to continue to be vigilant along these lines to respect differences, both within the church and outside. I'll stop there for now. I don't want to wear out the patience of the saints. So I will take 10 minutes of questions, and then we're done. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Who? Say it again. Okay. So, this country has a long history of discriminating against minorities and excluding them from the franchise. And with the emergence of the civil rights movement, the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, The laws have changed, requiring that government and corporate entities not act in a discriminatory way. But people have now recognized that we need to create a society that is much more inclusive than it is. We still are largely divided in terms of where we live, in terms of how we worship, in terms of our access to the franchise. And so initiatives are put in place. For example, I work for Yale New Haven Health System in the legal department. And in my department, if there is a job opening, we will make every effort to at least bring in one minority candidate. And so before a decision is made on who to hire. So, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think the concerns that many Christians have come into play when they are around people who think differently than they do. And they're challenged by those differences. And they want to feel comfortable around people who think and act and look like them. And so this is the challenge, the clash that we see taking place with these types of issues. But you know what? We need to respect people for who they are. If we don't want them in our lives telling us how to live, then we shouldn't be in their lives telling them how to live. We can certainly share the gospel as we understand it, but we can't compel them to believe the gospel as we believe it. And so, DEI serves a purpose to make sure that we all have access to schools, jobs, politics, healthcare, all of those things. They are functioning as a protection for us. And, in trying to achieve these goals, there will always, we're human beings, and so there will always be instances where there is an overreach, and it will be difficult. And we just have to try to keep finding the right balance and making sure that we continue to try to create a society that is inclusive. I saw a recent article that one of the most diverse institutions or academic institutions in the country, that honor goes to Andrews University. They had some problems, but it's diverse. We should be proud of that, right? There is diversity on race, there is diversity on geography, there is diversity in terms of people from outside the country. It is a diverse institution, and diversity is a strength. When we have people from different backgrounds contributing, you get a better product. That's what I will say, Pastor. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
The DEI, was it a consequence of the CRT studies eventually?
No. So CRT is basically an academic assessment that is being made. It's a scholarly review of things. The DEI measures that we see are the fruit of the civil rights movement. and the continuing efforts along those lines. Go ahead.
Is it possible for the Civil Rights Act to be removed as easily as Roe versus Wade was removed?
No. Because the Roe versus Wade was a judicial decision. It was a decision that was written by the Supreme Court. The Civil Rights Act is codified law. Interesting, as that law was being debated and considered, our church didn't really take a strong position in support of that law. But that is the law that we are perhaps the biggest champions of right now, because that's the law that protects us in some small way when we need an accommodation. So just lesson learned for us, that we need to pay attention as laws are being drafted and you know, that if they are going to have a positive effect, we need to be there commenting on, either supporting, or if it's going to have a negative effect, we need to be there commenting on, supporting, saying, you know, we are a church that is big on freedom of conscience, and any legislation that's going to impact that, we need to have our voice heard. Similarly, and I don't think we had the vision on this, but we are a church that promotes the health message. And so when the Obamacare was being debated, I'll just leave it there. Have mercy. It's our message, y'all. It's our message. Healthcare. Okay. People need healthcare. Okay. Any other questions? And everybody tired. They can't keep getting up.
Is the Voting Rights Act separate from the Civil Rights Act? Because they have chiseled away the Voting Rights Act.
That's a separate law. And, you know, the Supreme Court keeps looking at it to see if it's necessary or if Congress overreached, and they've found that Congress overreached their authority in certain sections. I'm not an expert on voting rights, so I just want to limit my comment. But you know, this is a big issue. Following 2020 as well, and I should have mentioned this earlier, like the states passed laws banning CRT, a few states also passed laws restricting access to voting, making it harder for people to register to vote and making it harder for them to vote. The reasons they're doing that is because voting is power, and this is a power grab. The reality is this, that the Republican Party is a minority party. The majority of Americans are Democrats. And so if all the Democrats voted, they would run the slate on all the elections. That's the reality. The Republicans are aware of it, and so they're going to do everything they can to suppress votes. The Supreme Court recently found, I think in Alabama, they went too far. And in Louisiana, they said, no, they didn't go too far. So it's an ongoing battle over voting. But if people are going to go through these extremes to prevent you from voting, it tells me it's something important to do. All right, one final question. Say it again. Go, come to the mic, sir. Come to the mic.
Is that a new statistic that you're saying that the Democrats are more than the Republicans?
No, I mean, look.
Why I'm saying that because a Republican pundit, I heard him say that they're more Republicans than the Democrats.
No.
Okay, all right.
So even when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. No, there's that's a pundit. That's what pundits pundit. I don't know that statistic, but Reagan likely won the popular vote as well. Right. But there are more Democrats than Republicans in the country. The Democrats, unfortunately, in some instances, are concentrated in areas, and that dilutes their vote. But if the elections were to shift to popular votes, it would not go well for the Republicans. They benefit from the Electoral College as it's set up. But it was set up as a check and balance to protect property owners at the founding of the Constitution. All right, one final question.
What is the danger now with we talked about the immigrants coming into the country now, and there's immigrants that don't look like us. And talking to a lot of these people, they tend to vote or think strongman, Republican, and I've talked to people from Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, wherever you want to talk, and they come over now, and they're more inclined to think about the strongman and Republican as being, so that's the threat.
So in terms of immigration is, a difficult issue. Everyone wants to be position themselves as strong on immigration and protecting our borders. If we let too many people in, it's going to be a problem. Let's be honest. But the means, the measures that we are taking sometimes to prevent non-legal immigration. Let me try to be politically correct. Children being put in cages. We can't go the route of being inhumane as a country. If we are going to be pro-life, it means pro-life across the board. And so you need to treat human beings humanely. And, look, there is a current legislation that has been approved by both the Democrats and the Republican leadership, and it can't come to a vote because Donald Trump wants to use it as an election issue. So that's where we are. That's all I will say on it. I don't agree with you that the vast majority of immigrants turn into Republicans, especially those coming from the South. The vast majority are likely going to be Democrats, and that's why the Republicans have been so vigorous in trying to prevent immigration from occurring. Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Who got them? Okay. Right. Right. Okay. All right. All right. One last question. Is it going to get me in trouble?
I don't know. What I would like to know is how come the Republicans can restrict voting rights and the Democrats can't seem to do anything about it?
They can't seem to do anything? Well, it depends on where you're talking. So if you are in Alabama, that's a stronghold for the Republican Party. They have a majority. Where you have a majority, you get to determine what happens. So, that's unfortunate. Majority rule. You have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. The three, justices who are liberals can't really win anything unless they can persuade through the power of the pen, their colleagues to follow their decision. All right. Thank you so much for your support and the participation. Hopefully, we have advanced the cause of liberty in some small measure, and that the issues are a little bit clearer for you. But, you know, we've got to remain vigilant. And so just want to thank you for inviting me and having me here today. God bless you all.